I'm Pete LaFrance for BeerBasics.com. Today I'm going to be telling you about The Widmer Way by Jeff Alworth. Publisher was good enough to send me a copy, and I certainly must say I enjoyed the read. It tells an awful lot about a particular brewery, the Widmer Brothers Brewery, and it tells a great deal about the transition that's going on in what people call the craft beer world. Now, I had a chance to interview Jeff about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that interview will follow this. But my take on this book, quite simply, it's a good story about a small brewery, how it developed, particularly the attitude of the people that ran the brewery. That is very important. It's any type of a business. If you value your employees and if you value what you're doing, you're going to have a success. If you value that more than the thought of making money, and I know that that's something that is idealistic, but in this book he tells you that the first 10 batches of a beer that they brewed to get started with, they didn't like it enough, and it was an alt beer, which was a new style in Portland. Nobody would have known whether an alt beer tasted right or not, but they knew it, and they threw 10 batches of beer down the drain before they came up with a version that they were willing to go to the public with. It's that type of a dedication that a company has to have, and he points it out quite well in this book. The other thing I think that is important is the transition from a small brewery being partially acquired by Anheuser-Busch, and how that affects not only how we perceive beers, but how the beer industry is changing in the United States. Well, as I say, I give the book 4 stars. Let's see what Ken has to say about writing it.
Instead of just writing a history of a brewery, the one that you know, kind of thing that you talked about, two brothers are plucky and they get dairy equipment and they found a brewery, I thought it would be interesting to figure out how does this brewery relate to the way a city develops their beer culture. What role does that play in every city has its own culture, and what are the how do we get there? And so that was a big part of the story. It's kind of a 3-part story. It's a story of craft brewing, because they got started at the start, and then they had this affiliation with Anheuser-Busch, which really predicted where the market was going to go, and they also had this big connection with the city of Portland. So it's kind of 3 stories in one. And there's not so many breweries that have the complexity and depth to be able to carry a story like that. So for me, from a narrative perspective, it was really interesting, and I'd never done anything like that project. I was excited to do a biography / history, which was fun for me, and as a challenge. In terms of writing, a lot of times if you do reference style work or review work, it's not quite as engaging or creative as telling a narrative. So for me, that was a lot of fun. The first trick was to find the story. I had a pretty good idea what the story was, but I had to interview a bunch of people and kind of fill in the gaps. And one of the 2 biggest gaps really were Rob and Kurt Widmer are these very quiet, self-effacing guys at the center of the story. We have celebrity brewers like Jim Cook and Ken Grossman, who people know. Like Ken Grossman probably can't walk down the street of Chico without everybody stopping him. Kurt Widmer could walk down any street in Portland and not a single person would know him. And so I had to figure out, how did these 2 guys engineer that? They have a different personality. What about them contributed to that? The name, the title, The Widmer Way, relates to a thing that happened inside the brewery, where they had this kind of fidelity to doing things the right way, which meant both in terms of making quality beer, but also nurturing and maintaining relationships with people in the industry. And so there was this thing where people inside the brewery would, if they had a question like, should we work with this distributor in San Diego or not, they would say, well, is it the Widmer Way? And then they understood this sort of ethics and everything around what the Widmer Way meant, and then they knew the answer. And I was kind of late in the game. I didn't hear it from Rob and Kurt. They were not the guys, because they're self-effacing. They would not mention that. I heard it from someone else, and I had to come back to them and say, guys, the Widmer Way, is that a thing? Like, I found out about this later, and it seems really important to the essence of who you are as a brewery. And they said, oh, yeah, that's a thing. So they were very self-effacing. And
What did you find out? What did you find out and included in the book that perhaps was not part of the history that either was known by the Widmers or yourself?
I think, kind of related to that Widmer Way thing, one of the most interesting elements was, first of all, they founded the brewery to sell alt beer. They had family, they're a German-Swiss family, and they had family in Dusseldorf, and Kurt went to Dusseldorf to learn how to make alt beer at Uriga. And Uriga, Josef Schnitzler was good enough to give him the yeast strain, and he brought that back. And, even though it was a crude, cobbled together brewery, it had the capacity for step mashing, and he had assembled a brewery that could make proper Dusseldorf alt beer. And unlike what would happen today, they started brewing the beer, I think in late 1984, and they dumped the first 10 batches of beer. And as I explored that, I found out that the first batch of beer was over-hopped, so it was probably not drinkable. The other 9 batches were fine. They just weren't dialed in perfectly. So here's this brewery starting on a shoestring, bleeding money, not getting to market, weeks and weeks and weeks, not getting to market, dumping the beer, until it's the exact beer they want. Despite the fact that no one in Portland had ever even heard of alt beer and would have had no idea how it was supposed to taste, right? So they could have released batch 2 and said, beer, and it would have been fine, but that's not how Kurt and Rob rolled, and so they almost went bankrupt until they figured out how to, they dumped 100 barrels of beer before they had a barrel that they felt they wanted to sell. And that's, an amazing story. No brewery would do that today. It's revealing of what a different time it was, because nobody knew anything about beer at the time, right? So they had a business plan, but they didn't know what kind of beer people wanted. They didn't know how to reach those people, and they didn't know how to convince publicans and the people who sell the beer to put it on tap. So there were all these things. They had all these assumptions, but they didn't have any data, and there was no way to get data. And so they rolled into this thing with the best guesses they had, but absolutely no idea. They were trying to sell a beer that nobody wanted and didn't understand.
And how would you describe the Widmer Way being different from other business cultures?
They were fortunate in that they decided to self-distribute, and that put them in direct contact with publicans, it's an important relationship to have retailers that you can rely on, and then you build these very strong relationships. And most of the breweries in Portland were brew pubs, so they just sold out of the brewery, and eventually they might start distributing outside the brewery. Rob and Kurt were immediately very connected to the brewery, to the city of Portland. And I don't think they predicted this, but I think that ended up being fundamental to the way the Widmer Way developed, because what they were, their business depended so much on other people and direct connections. They were delivering their own beer in this old Datsun pickup truck, and they were shaking hands with the barman, and they had these relationships. Rob told me the story of this place called the Produce Row that he took the first batch of Hefeweizen into, and Steve Turnston said, "We're going to sell the shit out of this." And I went back and we tried to find any reference, because there was some question about how to spell his name. This barman is long gone. This is like 1988, and I don't even know if I got his name spelled right in there, because he's gone, but he lives in the memory of Rob Widmer, who had this, important connection and this important experience with him. And they had that all over the city. And I think that was really an important kind of precursor to how the Widmer Way developed. They realized that beer is the people business, and they had to have a big connection with people.
The link to this book and to the other 5 books that Ken has written is down in the description box. If you're still with me, I appreciate it. Click on the subscribe button on the lower left-hand corner there, and you won't miss any one of the upcoming book reviews. And if you liked this, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. I'm Pete LaFrance for BeerBasics.com, and this has been Beer Basics Book Review.